In a small village at the edge of the great forest, there lived an old woman named Akosua. She was known by all the villagers for her peculiar ways and the strange creature she owned. But none were as infamous as her black goat Badu. The goat was as dark as the night sky, with eyes that shimmered like glowing embers, and a coat that gleamed under the moonlight. Badu was no ordinary goat. Whenever anyone dared to beat or harm it, they were struck with a curse that left them blind. The legend of Akosua and her goat had spread far beyond the village, and many of the villagers spoke of it in hushed tones. No one truly knew how the curse began or why Akosua had such a powerful animal in her care, but the effects of the curse were all too real. It was said that anyone who struck Badu, whether in anger or to chase it away, would lose their sight forever. Akosua lived alone in a small hut at the edge of the village, surrounded by thick bushes and trees that shielded her from the eyes of others. She was a solitary figure, her back hunched with age and her face creased with the lines of many years. Despite her isolation, she was not poor. She owned the most beautiful goats in the village, but it was Badu, the black goat, that was her prized possession. The villagers spoke of how Akosua would often be seen whispering to the goat, as if communicating with it in ways that no one could understand. The curse of Badu became a warning to the people. Do not touch the black goat, and do not strike it, or your eyes will pay the price. As a result, no one dared to harm the goat, for fear of losing their sight. But the villagers were not the only ones who knew of Badu's curse. One day, a young man named Kofi came to the village. He was a traveler, passing through on his way to the city. Hearing the whispers of the cursed goat, he grew curious and decided to seek out Akosua and her black goat. He had heard of strange stories from distant lands, but had never encountered a creature so feared, and he was determined to see it for himself. Kofi approached Akosua's hut with a mixture of excitement and skepticism. He found the old woman sitting on a wooden bench outside, stroking the goat's glossy black coat. The goat, as if knowing the young man's arrival, lifted its head and locked eyes with him. Kofi felt a shiver run down his spine, but he bravely walked forward. "Good evening, grandmother," Kofi greeted Akosua with a smile. "I've heard many stories about your goat. They say it curses anyone who strikes it. Is that true?" Akosua looked up at Kofi with piercing eyes, her face unchanging. "The stories are true, child," she said in a voice that was both soft and commanding. "This goat has been my companion for many years, and its powers are not to be taken lightly. It has seen things no human should see, and it has the power to take away what people cherish most, their sight." Kofi, intrigued by the old woman's words, couldn't resist a challenge. "I don't believe in curses," he declared. "If I strike your goat, nothing will happen to me." Akosua studied him for a long moment before she spoke. "If you strike my goat, it will not be your strength that determines the outcome, but your own heart. The curse is not something to test lightly. It is not a challenge, young man. It is a consequence." But Kofi was determined to prove his bravado. He had heard of similar stories before, tales of magic and curses that turned out to be nothing more than superstition. Without thinking further, he reached out and struck Badu with his hand. The moment his hand made contact with the goat's dark coat, a strange silence fell over the air. Kofi froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked into Badu's eyes, which now seemed to glow brighter, and then a sudden, overwhelming darkness engulfed him. His vision blurred, and he stumbled backward, falling to the ground. For a long moment, he couldn't understand what had happened. He reached for his eyes, feeling a cold, wetness in them, But when he looked up again, he realized with a jolt of horror that everything was dark. The world had gone completely black. I can't see, Kofi shouted, panic rising in his voice. I can't see anything. What have you done to me? Akosua stood up slowly, walking over to the young man. She did not show any anger, nor did she express pity. It is as I warned you, she said quietly. The curse is real, and it is not meant to be tested. You struck my goat, and now you will pay the price. Kofi felt his way around, stumbling blindly as he tried to comprehend the situation. Please, grandmother, help me, he cried. I didn't mean to do it. I thought it was a lie. Akosua said nothing, but instead turned her back to him, her voice barely a whisper. You will learn, young man, and the village will remember. For days, Kofi wandered the village in a state of despair. His blindness was a permanent punishment for his arrogance. He had been struck by the very curse he had doubted. The villagers, who had always feared Akosua's goat, now looked at Kofi with a mixture of pity and apprehension. They knew that he had brought this upon himself by disrespecting the old woman and her powerful creature. Word of Kofi's fate reached the ears of the king, a wise but stern ruler who had always sought to protect the village from the unknown forces that lurked in the surrounding lands. Hearing of the curse and the blindness of the young traveler, the king decided to take action. The king sent for Akosua and ordered her to appear before him at the royal palace. When she arrived, she was greeted with an air of both suspicion and reverence. The king, who had heard the tales of her black goat, was not amused by the trouble it had caused. Akosua, the king said sternly, I have heard the story of your goat and the curse it bears. You have brought suffering to this village. Your creature has blinded one of our own, and your actions threaten the safety of my people. I cannot allow this to continue. Akosua, unfazed by the king's words, stood tall. I have done nothing but protect my goat and its power. It does not seek to harm the village, only to prevent disrespect and foolishness. The king's expression hardened. The curse you wield is a danger to all. I command you to leave this village at once. Take your goat and go. The curse must be broken, and it cannot stay within the borders of my kingdom. Akosua, though old, was proud. I will leave, but remember this. The curse is not just on my goat. It lives in the hearts of those who fail to listen, those who choose to test what they do not understand. And so, Akosua was forced to leave the village. She took Badu with her, vanishing into the wilderness, never to be seen again. The villagers slowly rebuilt their lives, but they never forgot the lessons learned from the old woman and her cursed goat. And as for Kofi, though he regained his courage over time, the memory of the darkness that had overtaken his world would remain with him forever. From that day forward, the villagers learned to respect the unknown, and they whispered the tale of Akosua and her goat to each new generation,